I woke up to my phone vibrating against the wooden nightstand beside me. The clock on the wall read 12:03 a.m., and for a moment I thought maybe it was a weather alert or one of those automated pharmacy reminders I kept forgetting to turn off. But when I reached for the phone and saw my son's name on the screen, a cold prickle ran through me. Evan never called at this hour, not once in his 33 years. I answered quickly and pressed the phone to my ear. All I heard at first was a shaky breath, quiet, almost strangled. Then a whisper so thin it felt like it slipped straight into my bones. "Mom, I need to tell you something, but you have to stay calm." I sat up against the headboard, my pulse kicking hard in my throat. Evan always tried to protect me from stress. Ever since his father died. For him to say this, I knew whatever came next would not be small. "I'm listening, sweetheart." Another breath. Then he spoke fast and soft, like he was afraid someone in the next room would overhear. "Mom, you paid for the entire Christmas party this year. All of it. The catering, the decorations, the rental heaters, even the stupid monogram napkins Lena picked out. I know it was your savings. I know you didn't want me to worry. But, Mom, Mother-in-law says she doesn't want you there." The room went silent. I didn't breathe. My fingers tightened around the phone until my wrist ached. Outside the window, the December wind rattled the old maple tree branches, tapping against the siding like something alive. "She doesn't want me there at your party, in your home, the one I paid for." Evan's voice cracked. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought maybe Lena would speak up. But her mom, she said things I don't even know how to repeat. She told Lena that having you there would make the evening feel unbalanced, that guests wouldn't understand who you were. Then she told me to stop defending you because I was making things worse." I closed my eyes. My heart didn't hurt exactly. It just felt heavy, almost numb, like something inside had been set down once and for all. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but I only said one. "Did Lena say anything?" A pause, then the sound of Evan swallowing hard. "She didn't defend you, Mom. She said she didn't want to start a fight right before Christmas, and her mom took that as agreement." I pressed my palm against my forehead. The quiet in my bedroom felt too bright, too sharp. I could see the reflection of the moonlight in the window and my own faint outline. A woman sitting alone in a room she'd owned for 20 years. The same room where she'd stayed awake through every flu season, every school night, every year Evan needed her. I felt the weight of all of it. "Mom," Evan whispered again, "I tried fighting them. I told them you belong there, that you're the one who made this whole party possible. They ignored me. Then her mom told me that if you show up, she'll leave, and she said people will talk, like you're some outsider." I laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh, more like a thin exhale that had no warmth. An outsider, after everything I did for them. I heard Evan's breath hitch. "Mom, please don't think they speak for me. I want you there. I need you there. But I can't control what they'll do. And I didn't want you walking into something ugly without warning. I know, sweetheart. You did the right thing by telling me." He hesitated. "Mom, I know you're hurting right now. Please say something. Anything." I let the silence stretch for a moment, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I felt something settling in me, something clear, something final. "I'm fine, Evan." He let out a pained sound. "No, you're not." "Maybe not, but I will be." I didn't tell him what I was thinking, that I had spent my entire adult life being the one who accommodated, the one who didn't make waves, the one who filled in the missing pieces, wrote the checks, patched the emotional cracks, made holidays sparkle when everyone else barely contributed. I had told myself for years that being needed was the same thing as being valued. But now, at midnight, hearing my son whisper, like a man terrified of hurting me. I understood something with a clarity that felt like the first breath of winter air. I was being used, and I was done with it. Evan started crying quietly. He tried to hide it, but mothers know. His father had cried like that once in the hospital when he thought I wasn't listening. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I feel like everything is falling apart. I feel like I'm failing you. You're not failing me, I said softly. You're the only one in that house doing the right thing. The only one who remembered who made this Christmas possible. He sniffed hard. Do you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. You're my son. A soft knock echoed on his end of the line. A muffled woman's voice came through. Lena, asking if he was coming back to bed. He whispered, give me a minute, babe, please. Then he sighed into the phone. Mom, I have to go. But I'm coming by tomorrow morning. I don't care what they say. I need to see you. All right, drive safe. And Evan, thank you for being honest. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. The call ended. The room went silent again. I set the phone down gently, like it held something fragile. Then I lay back against the pillow and stared up at the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks in the plaster with my eyes. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and cold earth through the slightly open window. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's holiday lights flickered. My whole neighborhood was glowing for Christmas, yet my home felt darker than it ever had. I thought of all the years I'd saved for emergencies, for Evan's schooling, for the down payment on the house he and Lena couldn't afford. I thought of the quiet pride I'd felt paying for the event he was so excited about. I'd imagined walking in that night, bringing my casserole, hugging my son, sitting by the fire, belonging. Instead, I was being spoken about like a burden, an embarrassment, someone not fit for their table. I turned onto my side and pulled the blanket up to my chin. My chest tightened, but it wasn't sadness. It was something else rising, slowly, steadily, like water filling a cracked cup. Resolve. There comes a point in a woman's life when she is simply done allowing others to disrespect her, done waiting to be invited, done shrinking to make others comfortable. That moment had arrived for me at 12:03 a.m. on a cold December night. I closed my eyes. I let the final thought settle like a stone at the bottom of a lake. They don't want me at that party. Fine, but they have no idea what's coming. I exhaled slowly, steady and calm, already knowing that tomorrow would not unfold the way they expected. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Morning light seeped through the blinds long before I was ready to face it. I woke with the same heaviness that had settled over me in the night, but there was something steady beneath it too, like a spine I had forgotten I still had. I sat up slowly, letting my feet touch the cold floor, and for a few moments I just listened to the quiet hum of the house. It was the kind of quiet that made you take stock of your life, every choice, every wound, every kindness that had gone unnoticed. I made coffee the way I always do, strong and a little bitter, and wrapped both hands around the mug as I stood by the window. The street outside looked muted by frost. Mrs. Harkins across the street was already out walking her old terrier, bundled in her giant red coat like a bell pepper. Cars were still dusted with last night's snow. It all felt so normal, which almost made the night before feel unreal. Then my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter and the whole thing came rushing back. It was a text from Evan. On my way soon. Didn't sleep much. Just want to see you. I typed back, doors open. I took a slow breath, pulled my robe tighter around me, and sat at the dining table. I ran my fingertips along the wood grain, remembering the years of Thanksgiving dinners, birthdays, quiet breakfasts with Evan as a boy. Every scratch in the finish had a story. It reminded me that life has a way of stacking memories in front of us, even the painful ones, until we finally stop and look at what we have been carrying. A knock sounded at the front door, not the hurried kind, not the timid tap of a visitor. It was Evan's knock, steady and familiar. I opened the door to find him standing there with his shoulders lifted up like he was bracing against a storm. His cheeks were red from the cold, and his eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. "Hi, Mom." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Then he surprised me. He wrapped his arms around me and held on tight, like he used to when he was small and woke from nightmares. I hugged him back without saying a word. We moved to the kitchen. I poured him coffee. He sat at the table with his hands wrapped around the cup, staring at the rising steam like he was waiting for it to give him answers. "I barely slept," he said after a long pause. "I kept hearing all of it in my head. What she said, what they let her say. I just kept thinking how wrong it all felt." "I know, honey." He shook his head. "Mom, I shouldn't have let them treat you like that. I should have told them the party didn't matter if you weren't welcome. I should have walked out. You did what you could, Evan. You warned me. That was enough." "No." He looked up sharply. "It wasn't enough. You paid for everything. They know that. And still, they acted like you were some outsider barging into their perfect little holiday." His voice cracked again. He brushed his hand over his face, frustrated. "I hate that I let this happen. I hate that Lena didn't say anything. I don't even know who she was last night." There was something raw in his eyes, something I had not seen before. Shame, not for himself, but for the situation he was tangled in. It hurt to see him like that, but it also opened a space in the conversation that had been closed for too long. "What exactly happened before you called me?" I asked, my voice gentle. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Mom, it was awful. Her mother came over early to go over the party details, and she just took over. She moved the decorations you picked out. She said your choice of colors was old-fashioned. Then she started talking about the guest list and how she wanted everyone to feel comfortable, and she said you might feel overwhelmed, but that's not what she meant. She meant she didn't want to explain who you were." I felt something in my chest pinch tight, but I didn't interrupt him. Then she told Lena that some guests might not understand the dynamic, as if you're some stranger, as if the woman who paid for the event and helped raise me is some awkward technicality they need to hide. He clenched the handle of his mug. "Mom, it got worse. They talked about you like you weren't even a human being, like you were going to embarrass them just by showing up. And when I said I wouldn't accept that, her mom told me I had to think about the image we present as a married couple. She said having you there would disrupt the balance, whatever that means." I felt the bitterness in his voice, sharp and hot. "And Lena just stood there?" I asked quietly. Evan hesitated. He swallowed hard. "Mom, she didn't defend you. She didn't argue. She just said she didn't want to make waves before the holiday. That was when I realized she was choosing her mother's comfort over your dignity and over mine." He looked down, twisting the napkin between his fingers. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of two women pulling at me from opposite sides, and one of them is my wife." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. His skin was cold, and he held onto my hand like it was a lifeline. "You're not stuck, Evan. You're tired. There's a difference." He lifted his eyes slightly, confused. "You've been carrying the weight of both households, trying to keep everyone happy. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair to you." He nodded slowly. "It's just that everything changed so fast. Last year felt normal. This year it feels like I don't recognize my own home." "I know that feeling too well," I murmured. His shoulders slumped. "Mom, it breaks my heart that you gave so much, and they still treated you like this. Love makes us do a lot of giving, Evan, but giving doesn't mean accepting disrespect. He looked at me with a startled sort of realization, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in months. "I think I understand that now," he said quietly. "What they did last night, I won't forget it." Neither will I thought, though I didn't say it out loud. He pushed his chair back and stood up, pacing a little. "Mom, I think I'm losing myself in that house. I don't like who I'm becoming. I don't want you to think I've changed into someone who doesn't value what you've done for me." I stood too and rested a hand on his arm. "I know who you are. Evan, one night doesn't rewrite your character, but it does show you something important." He frowned slightly. "What's that?" "Who truly stands with you, and who only stands with you when it's convenient." He breathed out a shaky sigh. "Mom, can I stay here for a little while, just until I clear my head? Lena will be with her parents all day anyway, planning that ridiculous seating chart." "Of course you can. You never have to ask me that." He nodded, relieved, and set his keys on the counter. He walked down the hallway toward the guest room he used to sleep in when he'd fly home from college. I listened to his footsteps soften as he went, and then I heard the door click lightly shut. I turned back to the kitchen window. The morning looked brighter now, as if the world didn't know it had shifted overnight. Maybe it was time for me to shift with it. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, letting the heat settle into my palms. I stared at the backyard where the snow lay untouched, smooth and clean. People would think this was just another family argument, just another messy holiday. But something deeper had cracked open, something that couldn't be taped back together with polite smiles or forced apologies. The silence of the house felt different now, like the beginning of something instead of the end. I stood there letting the stillness sink in, fully aware that the next move I made would change everything for all of us. And strangely, the thought didn't frighten me the way it once would have. It felt almost like a relief. Outside, the sky lightened another shade, and the day continued on as if nothing had happened. But everything had. I stepped away from the window after a long while and walked around the house, straightening small things that didn't really need straightening. I picked up a pair of reading glasses from the coffee table, folded a blanket over the back of the couch, wiped a countertop that was already clean. It was what my hands did when my mind was turning itself over, trying to make sense of a situation that had suddenly revealed its true shape. Around mid-morning, I heard movement down the hallway. Evan emerged from the guest room with sleep still clinging to him. His hair was a mess, and he looked softer somehow, like the little boy who used to wander into my bedroom after thunderstorms. "I made oatmeal," he said like it was an apology. "Hope you don't mind." I smiled. "You're a grown man, Evan. You don't need to ask permission to use a kitchen." He smiled too, just a little, then sat at the table again. But he didn't eat much. His spoon moved oatmeal around without bringing it to his mouth. "There's something else I should tell you," he said finally. I sat down, hands folded in my lap. "Go on." He rubbed the back of his neck, the way he did when he was anxious. I wasn't sure if it mattered last night, but now I feel like it does. "Mom, her mother has been pressuring me about work. She keeps saying I need a job that reflects the Brooks family, whatever that means." I felt a slow warmth rising in my chest. Not anger exactly, but recognition. That old weight of someone placing themselves a step higher, trying to make you feel smaller. "What did she want you to do?" I asked. "She wants me to leave Ridgeway and join Emily's husband's firm. Apparently they want a family-centered image. She said it would stabilize the Brooks reputation, as if my entire career is a decorative piece on their mantle." He shook his head. "I love my job. I like building things that last. I like earning my own way. But she keeps hinting that if I stay where I am, I'm not doing enough for the family. Her family, that is." I let the words settle. This wasn't new. Not really. It was simply the first time he was saying it out loud. "She's trying to fold you into her world," I said quietly. "And in her world, anything that doesn't come from her is a threat." He nodded, his jaw tight. I decided to take the trash out, mostly to get a moment to breathe. The cold air hit my face like a splash of water. It was bright out now, bright in that crisp December way that makes every shadow look sharp. When I came back up the driveway, I saw my neighbor, Nora, tugging her recycling bin to the curb. Her hat was knitted with silver yarn that caught the sunlight, and she waved when she saw me. "Morning, Maggie. You look tired. Everything okay?" I hesitated. Nora had known me for 12 years. She had seen me trim hedges in the rain, shovel snow before dawn, plant tulips every spring. She knew enough of my life to understand when something was off. "Rough night," I said. She walked over, lowering her voice. "Let me guess. Trouble at your son's." I let out a slow sigh, something like that. She clicked her tongue. That mother-in-law of his. I have seen plenty of women like her. Always dressed like they are hosting a garden party. Always acting like the sun rises because they permitted it. Not your type of people. Maggie. I didn't say anything because she was right, and because hearing another woman name the truth felt grounding. She touched my arm. "Whatever it is, you don't deserve to be treated poorly, not after everything you've done for that boy." I gave her a small smile, thanked her, and watched her walk back toward her porch with her old beagle trotting behind her. The simple kindness from her words sat gently on my shoulders, a reminder that not everyone saw me as something to be managed or hidden. When I went back inside, Evan was scrolling through his phone. His face had gone pale. "Mom," he said softly, "look at this." He handed me the phone. It was a group text thread between Lena, her mother Vivian, and Emily. Vivian was describing the upcoming Christmas dinner in detail, the table layout, the guest dress code, the imported floral arrangements, then a message from her that made my stomach tighten. "We need to keep the evening tasteful. I do not want to explain Maggie's presence to the guests. It complicates things. It would be best if she avoids attending. We can thank her for her contribution privately after the holiday." My eyes moved slowly over the sentence. Complicates things. Like I was a smudge on her perfect canvas. I gave the phone back to Evan. "I don't think she realizes what she is saying," he murmured. "She knows exactly what she is saying. Those kinds of women choose their words the way jewelers sort diamonds." He sat down again, head lowered. "I don't know how to face her now, or Lena." I let out a breath that fogged the edge of the window. This wasn't just one insult. It was the culmination of many small ones that had slowly peeled away the truth. My mind drifted back to the first time I met Vivian Brooks. It was at their engagement dinner 4 years ago. I remembered walking into their backyard in Lake Oswego, full of warm lights and soft music. I had worn my best blue blouse, ironed it twice, even wore the silver earrings Evan bought me for my birthday. Vivian had approached with a sparkling smile, then looked me up and down with eyes that measured worth, not warmth. She had been polite, almost overly so, but underneath was a quiet dismissal that I recognized immediately. She had placed a gentle hand on my arm and said it must have been such a sacrifice raising Evan alone in a place as modest as Portland, as if the city she lived in made her superior, as if my years of long shifts as a pediatric nurse meant less because they didn't come with prestige. The memories stung as they resurfaced. Evan looked at me with guilt shadowing his face. "I need to be honest. Mom, this didn't start last night. It has been building. I should have said something sooner." "Perhaps we both should have," I said. "Perhaps it took something this obvious to make us see it." He rested his elbows on his knees. "I feel like she has been trying to pull me away from you since we got married. Like I belong to their family now, not my own." I felt a quiet ache in my chest. "You don't belong to anyone. Evan, families are supposed to share, not claim ownership." His shoulders rose with a shaky breath. "I know, but her mother doesn't see it that way. She thinks her world is the only one that matters. I sat beside him and placed a hand on his back. I know her type, Evan. They need control the way most people need air. Your success reflects on her. Your choices reflect on her. Even your family reflects on her. And if something does not fit her vision, she removes it. He looked at me with something close to fear. I think she wants to remove you from my life completely. The words hung in the air, heavy, true, but it did not make me crumble. It made me sharper. Let her try, I said quietly. Evan blinked, startled by the steel in my voice. I stood and went to the sink, rinsing my hands under warm water just to have something to do. The rhythm steadied me. When I turned around, Evan was still watching me. Mom, he asked softly. I'm all right. I just need a moment. He nodded and stepped into the living room, giving me space. I dried my hands, set the towel down, and felt something inside me shift. It was not anger and not sadness. It was clarity, a recognition that the lines had been drawn long ago, and I had simply refused to look at them. I walked to the window again and watched a car pass slowly over the icy street. The Christmas lights on the houses glowed warm and soft, untouched by the undercurrent of tension in my own family. I knew then that things were only beginning to unravel, and that the truth about Vivian Brooks, her intentions, and her need for control would not stay hidden much longer. I could feel it, the first quiet crack in the structure she had built around my son's life. And cracks have a way of widening. I woke the next morning with the faint echo of yesterday still pressing on my chest, but I pushed it aside and forced myself to start the day. Evan had already left to shower and change clothes, and I heard the low hum of the bathroom fan drifting down the hallway. The house felt different with him here, heavier in some ways, but also steadier, like the truth finally had a place to sit. I walked into the living room and began sorting through the receipts and lists I had kept for the Christmas party. They were spread out across the coffee table in neat little piles. Catering order, deposit for the outdoor heaters, the custom centerpiece invoice that Lena had insisted on, the final payment for the cookies shaped like evergreens that Vivian claimed were essential for a proper holiday display, all of it paid from the same savings account I had spent decades building. I ran my thumb over the edges of the papers. The total was more than I wanted to admit. Money I had saved little by little, sometimes $10 at a time, on nights after long shifts when all I wanted was a warm bath and quiet. I had thought it was worth it, that making the holiday bright for my son and his growing family was a way of anchoring us together. Now the numbers felt like proof of my own blindness. Evan joined me in the living room, dressed in clean jeans and a navy sweater. He looked better, but not by much. He sat beside me and studied the papers for a moment. Mom, you did all of this yourself, every bit of it. I did not answer. He knew the truth already. He picked up the receipt for the catering deposit and exhaled sharply. They would not even have a party without you, not the one they keep bragging about. Bragging? The word made something click in my mind. I remembered the way Vivian had spoken at Thanksgiving, bragging about how they were hosting this year because it was time for the Brookside to show what a real Christmas should look like. She had spoken of the menu, the floral arrangements, the guest list, all with the confidence of someone who believed the world revolved around her sense of importance. And then she had smiled at me, that polite, tight smile that said she was doing me a favor by acknowledging me at all. I stood up, collected the papers, and placed them into a folder. Evan watched me closely. What are you doing, Mom? I am putting things in order. That is all. He looked like he wanted to press the issue, but he held back. Instead, he walked with me to the kitchen, where I made tea and set 2 cups on the table. He kept glancing at the clock, clearly trying to decide whether he should go home or stay. I knew that look. It was the same one he had when he was a teenager torn between joining his friends and keeping me company on nights I worked late. "You do not have to stay if you do not want to," I said. He rubbed his hands together. "I do not want to go back there yet. Not before I talk to Lena alone. And I'm not ready for her mother." I nodded. It was enough. After breakfast, Evan went outside to call a coworker from Ridgeway, and I stayed in the kitchen, sorting the last of the receipts. When I bent down to pick up a piece of paper that had slipped under the table, a sudden flutter hit my chest. Light at first, then stronger. I gripped the side of the table. It passed as quickly as it came, but it left me winded. I sat down and waited for my breathing to even out. Stress. I told myself. Too much worry in too little time. But another part of me knew that my heart had been trying to warn me for months. I had ignored it, the same way I had ignored the way I was being pushed aside by the people who claimed to be family. When I felt steady again, I went to the bedroom to get my coat. I needed air. More than that, I needed space to think clearly. On the way out, I passed the hallway mirror and paused. My reflection looked older than I expected. My hair was gathered hastily at the back of my head, and the faint lines around my mouth were deeper than I remembered. But there was something else, too, something I had not seen in a long time, a firmness in my expression, a kind of quiet strength. Outside, the sky was a wash of winter blue. I walked slowly down the street, letting the cold air settle my thoughts. Houses were decorated with garlands and strings of warm white lights, all of them glowing softly against the frost. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like the world was celebrating without me. I passed by Nora's house, and she waved from her porch, her beagle curled at her feet under a fleece blanket. "Come sit for a minute," she called. I walked up the steps and sat beside her. The wood beneath us felt cold, but her presence was warm in the way only a lifelong friend could be. "Rough morning," she said gently. "It is one of those weeks," I replied. She nodded. "I suspected as much. I saw your son leave earlier. He looked like a man with too much on his shoulders. He has been carrying pressure from both sides for a long time." I said, "I do not think he realized how heavy it was until it crushed something." Nora sighed and glanced toward the street. "I have known women like that mother-in-law. They decorate everything in gold and think it hides their cruelty. The moment they feel you threaten their perfect picture, they try to erase you from it." Her words struck close to the truth. "You do not deserve to be erased," she added. I swallowed hard. I had spent so long pretending everything was fine that hearing someone state the obvious made me feel exposed, but it also made me feel less alone. I stayed with her a few more minutes before heading back home. As I walked, my mind replayed everything that had happened in the last 24 hours, the party plans, the money, the dismissal, the whisper in my son's voice. My heart fluttered again, softer this time, as if reminding me that every moment I spent in this limbo was taking something from me. When I returned, Evan was inside packing an overnight bag. He looked up when I opened the door. "I am going to talk to Lena later today," he said. "I need to look her in the eye and ask her why she let this happen." "Are you sure that is the conversation you are ready for?" He nodded firmly. "I have been avoiding it for too long." I watched him zip the bag. He paused and looked at me again. "Mom, what are you going to do?" I set my keys on the counter and let the question hang in the air for a moment. Then I answered honestly, "I'm going to do what I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to stand up for myself." He looked at me with a mix of worry and relief. "Just promise me you will not let them hurt you again," he whispered. I touched his cheek gently. "I have learned my lesson. Evan, I will not let anyone take my place in my own life." His shoulders dropped just slightly, the tension easing. He nodded and picked up his bag. "I will be back later, Mom." "Take your time," I said. He left, and when the door closed behind him, the house fell silent again. But it was not the heavy kind of silence that made me feel small. It was the kind that made room for decisions. I walked to the dining table, opened the folder of receipts, and laid everything out in a single line. One by one, I looked at each paper, each proof of every quiet sacrifice I had made. Then I looked towards the window, toward the world outside that had kept turning even as mine shifted. Something had to change. And now that the truth was out in the open, there was no going back to pretending. I pressed my hand over my heart as another faint flutter brushed through me. Not fear this time, not sadness. A signal. The beginning of clarity, and I knew the next step was coming into focus. I sat at the dining table for a long time after Evan left, letting the quiet of the house settle around me. The papers were still laid out in a careful line, each one a reminder of the years I had tried to hold our family together with kindness and money and hope. I lifted one receipt, then another, and finally placed them all back into the folder. My hands were steady now, my breath even. Whatever fear had once kept me silent had loosened its grip. I took my coat from the hook by the door and grabbed my keys. The cold outside felt sharper than before, but it woke me up in a way nothing else could. Frost still clung to the edges of the mailboxes and the brittle grass. I walked slowly to my car, breathing in long, steady breaths. I knew exactly where I needed to go. The drive to Andrew Blake's office took 20 minutes. He had been my attorney years ago when I refinanced the house, and I knew he handled real estate matters with a directness I could trust. The parking lot was half empty when I arrived. Most people were out Christmas shopping, not dealing with the unraveling of their family. Inside, the receptionist recognized me and led me to his office. Andrew was in his mid-60s now, graying hair, thick glasses, the same calm presence he had always had. He stood when I walked in and shook my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Maggie Hall, it has been a while." "Too long," I said. He gestured for me to sit. "What brings you in today?" I opened the folder, laying the documents in front of him. His eyes scanned the first page, then the next. He nodded slowly, his brows lifting slightly as he took in the details. "So you are still listed as a 50% owner of the property, and they do not know it." "They do not," I said, "and they prefer it that way." He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me what is going on." I told him, not every detail, but enough for him to understand that the situation had passed the point of repair, that I had been pushed aside in a home I helped pay for, that I had been publicly excluded from a holiday I single-handedly funded, that I had tried to stay quiet out of love. But now I could see how silence had only given people permission to treat me as if I were invisible. Andrew listened without interrupting. When I finished, he steepled his fingers and let out a slow breath. "You have options, Maggie, clear options. The question is how far you want this to go." I folded my hands in my lap. I want my dignity back, and I want the truth to be acknowledged, nothing more. He nodded. "Then the cleanest way is to sell your portion of the property, if the buyer wants full control. The other owners will have to vacate within the legal notice period. 60 days in Oregon for this type of sale. 60 days, enough time for consequences to land where they needed to. Would that be difficult to arrange?" I asked. "Not at all. Investor buyers look for properties exactly like this. Half ownership is messy for a family, but simple for a cash buyer. You only need to decide if you want to proceed." I sat quietly for a moment. My heart fluttered once, then calmed. I knew what I needed to do. "I want to proceed." His expression softened. "You are sure?" "Very sure." "Then let me make some calls." He stepped out of the room. I sat still, hands crossed, watching the muted winter light filter through the blinds. I thought of Evan, of the way his voice had trembled in the dark. I thought of the years I had sacrificed quietly. I thought of every moment I had been treated like an accessory instead of a human being. For the first time in a long while, The ache inside me felt less like despair and more like release. When Andrew returned, he closed the door gently behind him. I have an interested buyer. His name is Brad Myers. He is local, familiar with the area, and purchases properties in cash. He can meet today if you are available. Today? That was fast, I said. You came to me ready, Maggie. People sense that. I followed him out of the office and into a small conference room where a man in his mid-40s stood waiting. He extended his hand with a polite, businesslike smile. Mrs. Hall, pleasure to meet you. I understand you want to sell your share of the Beaverton property. Yes, I said firmly, I do. He nodded. I have reviewed the address and the valuation. I am prepared to make an immediate offer. Cash. Full purchase of your 50%. You would receive funds within 72 hours. In exchange, I would take possession as co-owner and begin the notice process. 60 days, Andrew added. Standard requirement. Brad nodded again. I would serve notice next week, possibly sooner. The holidays may delay the exact date, but paperwork can be prepared today. I inhaled slowly. The air felt different somehow, cleaner. Let us do it, I said. Brad smiled slightly. I will have contracts ready in 20 minutes. As he stepped out, Andrew looked at me with a warm, steady gaze. This is a bold move, Maggie. Not many people your age would take such a step. It needed to be done. He nodded. Then let us make sure it is done correctly. The contract signing moved quickly. Signatures, initials, dates, witness forms. It all felt surreal, like I was stepping out of the life I had been stuck in and into one where I finally chose myself. When Brad shook my hand and thanked me, he did so with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he had purchased. When it was finished, I walked out into the parking lot. The air was crisp, the sky a gentle gray. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel, letting the weight of the moment sink in. This was not revenge, not to me, this was correction. When I drove home, I found Evan's car in my driveway. He was pacing near the porch, arms crossed tightly. Mom, where were you? I have been trying to reach you. I stepped out of the car, my breath forming soft white clouds in the cold. I went to see Andrew Blake. His eyes widened. The attorney. Mom, why? Because it was time, I said. He ran a hand through his hair. Please tell me you did not do anything drastic. I walked past him to the door. Nothing drastic, something necessary. Inside the house, I set my purse down on the entry table and removed my coat. Evan followed me, looking both anxious and confused. Mom, talk to me. What did you do? I turned to him slowly, meeting his eyes with the calm certainty that had settled in me. I made sure no one can treat me like a guest in a home I helped build ever again. He took a step toward me, frowning, but before he could speak, the ringing of my phone broke the silence. I reached for it and saw Andrew's name on the screen. I answered. He said the contracts had been filed electronically. Everything was official. Thank you, I replied softly. When I hung up, Evan stared at me, waiting. The truth sat between us, quiet and solid. I knew I would have to tell him, but not yet. Not until the moment was right. For now. I walked to the window, watching the pale sun dip lower behind the rooftops. The day had shifted again, tilting everything just slightly. And the next step was coming sooner than they expected. I stayed by the window long enough for the light to change across the houses on the street, long enough for Evan to shift anxiously behind me. He kept asking what I meant, what exactly I had done. But he asked with the caution of someone afraid of the answer. I did not blame him. The ground under our feet had been shifting for days, and neither of us knew where it would settle. He finally stepped closer and said he needed to head back home, at least for a little while. Lena had texted him several times. She wanted to talk. He did not look eager, but he also did not want to run from her. I told him he should go. He kissed my cheek before leaving, and the door clicked shut behind him with a heaviness I had not noticed before. The house felt still again, not empty, just paused, like it was waiting. I walked into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, the events of the morning and the weight of the decisions I had made pressed down on me, and my heart fluttered again in that quick, nervous rhythm. I placed a hand on my chest and breathed slowly until it settled. It passed, but the reminder lingered. Stress was a game that had been wearing on me for months, and now I understood why my body had been trying to speak, even when I refused to listen. When I stood again, a new certainty filled me. I went to the closet, took down the box where I kept old documents, and sifted through until I found the original loan papers and refinancing forms from years ago. I laid everything out on the bed, forming a timeline of my own history with that house. Every signature, every payment, every sacrifice. It grounded me, reminding me that I had not imagined my part in that home. I had built it right alongside my son. The phone rang just as I was gathering the papers back into the box. It was Nora. She never called unless something mattered. I answered quickly and heard her warm voice ask if I was all right. She said she had seen Evan leave looking troubled. I assured her I was fine, though even I could hear the quiet tremor under my words. She asked if I wanted company, but I told her maybe another day. She seemed to understand without pressing. After the call ended, I returned to the living room and began organizing a separate stack of documents for Andrew. My intention was not revenge. It was preparation, the kind that makes you stand taller, the kind that makes you breathe more evenly. A few hours passed in this quiet work before my phone buzzed with a message from Brad. He said the paperwork was filed successfully, and he had begun arranging the notice of new ownership with the county office. He added that the official notice timeline would likely begin the following week, depending on holiday processing, and that once the notice was served, the 60-day period would officially start. Reading his message made everything feel even more real. It also made me pause in the middle of the room. I felt my knees weaken a little, not from fear, but from the magnitude of the shift I had initiated. For so long, I had let other people decide what role I played in their lives. Now the decision belonged to me. I set the phone down and breathed until I felt steady again. Later that afternoon, I heard the front door open. Evan stepped inside, the cold air following him. He looked drained, but calmer than before. He said he had spoken with Lena and that things had been tense. She had defended her mother, then apologized, then defended her again. She was tangled, he said, caught between loyalty and fear. But she also admitted that Vivian had an influence over her that she no longer knew how to challenge. Evan said he had told Lena he needed space. He would spend the night with me while they both tried to think more clearly. I agreed, though I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He loved her, that was clear. But love could not fix what someone refused to see. He disappeared into the guest room to rest, and I let him. He needed quiet. So did I. When the house fell still again, I took out a notebook and began listing everything that needed to be addressed with Andrew. Transfer of funds, filing of the deed, the procedure for serving notice. I wrote as if the act itself steadied me, each word a small anchor in the shifting waters. As evening settled over Portland, I found myself sitting with a cup of chamomile tea near the living room window. The street outside was soft with early winter light. A few kids were building a lopsided snowman near the bend in the road. Across the way, Mrs. Harkins switched on her porch lights, bathing her walkway in a warm yellow glow. It was peaceful in a way that felt almost foreign. Then the phone rang again. Not a call this time, a text from Andrew. He wanted to confirm a meeting the next day to finalize the file for the sale. I typed back that I would be there. then sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment. My heart fluttered again, lighter this time, almost like a reminder that despite everything, I was still here, still choosing, still grounded in a life that belonged to me. I sipped my tea and let the warmth spread through my chest. The sound of footsteps came from the hallway a few minutes later. Evan appeared, his hair tousled from sleep, his expression softer. He said he had been thinking a lot about what his life had become, how much pressure he had allowed into the home he had built. He said he could finally see how long his wife and her mother had been shaping the walls around him. I listened, saying little, because I could tell he needed to hear his own voice more than mine. After he finished, he placed a hand on my shoulder and told me he loved me. I felt the sincerity in his voice. It was a reminder that no matter what else happened, the bond between us had not been broken. Shaken, perhaps, but not broken. He went back to rest. I sat alone again in the living room, watching the soft shadows settle across the carpet. Another hour passed, then another. The day moved with a quiet rhythm, like the calm before a storm. I knew what was coming. Vivian had no idea that the house she believed her daughter controlled was now owned by a man she had never met. She did not know that her grip on the family had already begun to loosen. What awaited her in the coming days would not be dramatic at first. It would be steady, inevitable, like the shifting of land beneath old foundations. Night crept over the neighborhood, and the lights in the houses across the street flickered on, one by one. I sat there, still and steady, knowing that tomorrow would begin the final unraveling. I breathed in the quiet and let it settle inside me. There was a sharpness to it, but also clarity. Everything was already in motion. Christmas Eve arrived, with a sky the color of pale steel, the kind that holds its breath before a storm. I woke early, long before the sun rose over the quiet Portland neighborhood, and lay still for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the furnace. Evan was still asleep in the guest room. I could hear the faint rhythm of his breathing through the cracked door. For a brief second, I wished the day ahead were an ordinary one, filled with nothing more than cooking and gathering and familiar laughter. But ordinary had slipped out of reach days ago. I dressed slowly, choosing a warm sweater and the soft wool coat that had hung untouched since last winter. When I stepped into the hallway, I found Evan already sitting at the kitchen table. He had showered and dressed neatly, as if preparing himself for a duty he did not want, but could not avoid. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I am heading back to the house. I need to talk to Lena again. She called twice already. Do you feel ready for that conversation?" I asked. "Not exactly, but I need to do it." I nodded. He stood and pulled on his jacket, then hesitated. He took my hand gently and gave it a small squeeze. "I do not know what is going to happen today, Mom, but I want you to know that I am sorry for all of it." "You do not have to apologize for other people," I said softly, "just for the things you choose. And today you are choosing honesty." He nodded once, then stepped outside into the cold morning. I watched his car pull away, the tires crunching over thin ice. I moved through the house, tidying things that did not need tidying. I wiped the counters, smoothed the blankets on the couch, rearranged the stack of envelopes near the phone. All small motions meant to steady my breathing. Around 9:30, I pulled out the wrapped gifts I had bought for Evan and Lena, setting them on the coffee table. I touched each one gently, even after everything. I had not thrown them away. Giving love freely had never been my weakness. Letting others mistake it for permission had been. Around 2 in the afternoon, the sky darkened. A soft wind brushed against the siding, making the trees sway in slow arcs. I knew the Brooks family always held their Christmas Eve dinner early. Pictures usually went up online by 4. That thought made my jaw tighten. They would carry on with their celebration, unaware of the shift already underway. By 3:30, I grabbed my coat and carried one of the gift bags to the car. The house on Redwood Lane looked just as it had last year, dressed in white lights and garland, neat and bright like a page torn from a magazine. Cars filled the driveway. Guests mingled by the door. I parked across the street, stepped out, and felt the winter air sting the tip of my nose. I approached the porch slowly, gift bag in hand. I had no intention of going inside. I only wanted to give Evan his present and then leave before anyone could pretend I did not belong. The door opened before I reached it. Vivian stepped out, dressed in a tailored green dress, her hair perfectly styled. She froze when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she said sharply. I kept my voice steady. "I came to drop off a gift for my son." She glanced at the bag, then at me, her mouth tightening. "That will not be necessary. He is busy. We are starting dinner soon." I stepped 1 inch closer. "I will not be long." She crossed her arms. "You were told not to come. We made that clear." My heart beat once, slow and heavy. I looked into her eyes and saw not confidence, but fear disguised as pride. "You made your opinion clear," I said, "but this is still my family, whether you approve or not." Before she could respond, a deep voice called out from the sidewalk, "Good evening, I'm looking for Vivian Brooks." We both turned. A woman in a dark navy coat walked up the path holding a slim brown envelope. Her posture was firm, official. The badge clipped inside her coat identified her as a process server. Officer Elena Romero. Vivian blinked in confusion. "Why are you looking for me?" Officer Romero checked the envelope. "Name is correct. I have legal documents requiring your signature." My breath held, though my face stayed calm. Evan appeared behind his mother-in-law just then, his expression shifting from surprise to dread as he saw the envelope. People inside the house began to quiet. The music softened. The air stilled. For me, time slowed. Officer Romero held out the envelope. "You have been served notice of change in property ownership. This includes a 60-day notice to vacate. You must review the contents immediately." Vivian stared as if the world had tilted beneath her feet. What? What are you talking about? This is our home. It is owned equally by Margaret Hall and her buyer. The new co-owner has initiated the legal process. Her gaze snapped to me. What did you do?" I met her shock with calm. "I exercised my rights, something you never expected me to use." She clutched the envelope in disbelief. "You cannot do this. You cannot just push us out. This is my daughter's home. It is a home I helped build." I said quietly, "And one you tried to erase me from. I am simply giving you the clarity you gave me." People had gathered in the entryway. Thomas stood behind Vivian, his face pale. Lena appeared too, her eyes darting between her mother and Evan, panic rising like a tide. Vivian's voice cracked. "This is cruel. How dare you humiliate us on Christmas Eve?" "Humiliation requires an audience," I replied. "You provided your own." She moved toward me, but Thomas held her arm. Lena whispered something to Evan, her voice trembling. I could not hear the words. Officer Romero asked Vivian to sign the receipt confirming she received the documents. With shaking hands, she scribbled her signature. Then the officer nodded and stepped away. Vivian stared at the envelope like it was a burning coal. Her perfectly arranged evening was falling apart in front of everyone, and she had no script for this moment. I stepped back toward the walkway, giving Evan one long look. His face was full of conflict, but beneath it was something else, understanding, recognition, a quiet gratitude. Vivian pointed a trembling finger at me. "You did this to destroy us." "No, I did this to stop you from destroying me." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. The porch lights cast a sharp glow on her face, revealing the cracks beneath the polished exterior. I turned without waiting for anyone to stop me and walked down the steps, the cold air brushing against my cheeks. Behind me, the voices rose, scattered and confused, but none of them mattered now. At the end of the driveway, I paused and looked back once. The Brooks house no longer felt like a place I needed to endure. It was simply a structure, one I no longer owed anything to. I opened my car door, placed the gift bag gently on the passenger seat, and sat down. My hands rested on the steering wheel as I took one long, steady breath. The night was still unfolding, but the hardest part was done. I sat there for a moment, letting the warmth from the car heaters start to push back the cold on my face. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My breathing was slow and even. I felt the weight of what had happened settle inside me like a stone sinking to the bottom of a lake. Not heavy in a painful way, heavy in a final way, a settled way. I turned the key and the engine hummed. Then I drove away from Redwood Lane without looking back a second time. The farther I got from that house, the lighter my chest felt. Though the air in the car was still cold, Portland's winter had a way of seeping into the quiet corners of everything, even courage. But tonight I did not feel the kind of cold that made a person shrink. It felt like the crisp air that comes right before winter breaks, a beginning inside an ending. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light clicked on automatically. That small glow felt warmer to me than anything I had seen at the Brooks home. I gathered the gift bag from the passenger seat and carried it inside with me. Once I closed the door behind me, I leaned against it for a moment, letting my heartbeat settle again. Everything felt calm in a way that surprised me. I had expected adrenaline or guilt or shaking hands. Instead, there was only stillness. About 20 minutes passed before I heard tires on gravel. Evan's car pulled into my driveway, much faster than usual. The headlights cut across the living room walls. Then the engine shut off, and the front door swung open before I could even stand. "Mom!" His voice was rough, somewhere between stunned and breathless. He stepped inside without closing the door all the way. His cheeks were flushed from the cold and the rush. "You did it. Oh my God. You actually did it." I quietly pushed the door shut and waited for him to breathe a little. He paced once, ran both hands through his hair, then stopped in front of me. "Mom." That scene. I have never seen her lose control like that, ever. She did not know what was happening, not a clue. I exhaled slowly. She was not supposed to. He shook his head in disbelief. People were staring. Her friends. Some of her cousins. The whole thing went silent for a moment. She took it as a personal attack. You saw that. I nodded. She treated me as if I did not exist. I gave her clarity. He sat heavily on the couch. His face was pale with the shock of it, but beneath the shock was something else. Relief. A quiet relief he could not mask. Then he looked up. "Mom, tell me everything. All of it. What you did this week. And why." I sat beside him. The warmth from his shoulder brushed mine. I folded my hands in my lap and spoke plainly. I told him about visiting Andrew Blake, about the deed, about the investor, about the cash sale, about the path Vivian had pushed me down without even realizing it. I told him the truth, all of it, without softening the edges. By the time I finished, his eyes were rimmed with something between guilt and awe. "I do not blame you, Mom. I blame her. I have been blind to this for so long. I let her dictate too much. I should have protected you." He rubbed his forehead. "I tried to make Lena understand tonight. I really did. But she is so scared of her mother. It is like she cannot think clearly. She kept saying we could figure this out if everyone stayed calm. Everyone except the person who made this mess. Did she blame me? I asked. He paused. She tried not to, but she did not understand the depth of what you have been carrying. She thought this was an argument, a misunderstanding. She does not know the years behind it, the weight behind it. I nodded slowly. She may never understand. He looked at me with tired, honest eyes. I am sorry that she cannot see you the way I do. I placed my hand over his. I'm sorry that you were caught between us. He leaned back and let out a long breath. Then he told me what happened after I left. When the officer walked away, the guests inside had gone silent. Vivian stormed into the kitchen, yelling at Lena and Thomas that this could not be real, that someone must have made a mistake. Thomas took the envelope and read through it twice, each time his face draining more. He had known nothing about the mortgage split. He had assumed the Brooks family held more control than they actually did. The truth rattled him in a way few things ever had. Evan said that Emily had stepped out from the living room and whispered to him that she had overheard her mother months ago talking about pushing me away little by little, making sure I was nearby only when convenient. Emily said she had felt uneasy about it but never said anything. She was afraid of upsetting her mother. As Evan told me this, he rubbed his temples. I felt stupid. All these signs, all this time. I kept thinking if I stayed patient, things would get better. Patience is a useful tool, I said softly, but it cannot fix a person who has no interest in changing. He sank further into the cushions, exhausted. Then he told me about the final blow. Vivian had screamed that she would not leave the house, that she would fight it, that she would not let me win. She used that word, win, as if life were a contest and she was losing ground. Her words had cut through the room like ice water. Lena had started crying. Thomas pulled Vivian aside, telling her to calm down, telling her this was bigger than pride. But Vivian refused to hear reason. Evan said he felt something break in him then, something he had been holding together for months. I cannot live like that anymore, he whispered. Mom, I cannot keep pretending everything is fine when she controls every corner of our lives. I love Lena, but I cannot let her mother dictate who I am or who I can care about. Something has to change. His voice cracked on the last word. I felt it in my own chest. You are stronger than you think, I said. He gave a hollow laugh. I do not feel strong. Strength arrives quietly, I murmured, often right after clarity. He looked over at the gift bag I had set on the counter earlier. That yours? He asked. It is for you both. It was supposed to be for tonight. His shoulders softened. Thank you, he whispered, for that, and for standing up for yourself. I wish I had done it sooner. It is not too late, I said, not for you, not for anyone. He sat quietly for a moment, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What happens now? Really happens. Now, I replied, they process the notice. Then they have 60 days to adjust. It is not vengeance. Evan, it is truth catching up. He stared down at his hands. I think Lena will either finally grow a backbone or fall apart. I do not know which yet, but I know I am done letting her mother steer our marriage. I touched his arm gently. Whatever direction this takes, you will not face it alone. He swallowed hard, then nodded. We stayed like that for several minutes, both of us absorbing the reality that had unfolded. Outside, the Christmas lights on the neighboring houses flickered softly against the dark. Children's laughter faintly echoed from down the street. Life continued, as it always did, even when the ground shifted beneath our feet. Eventually, Evan stood. I should get some sleep. I think tomorrow is going to be another long day. You can stay here as long as you need, I said. He gave a small, grateful smile. I know. He disappeared into the guest room, the door closing with a quiet thump. The house settled with him, falling into a soft stillness. I stood at the window and looked out into the cold night. Somewhere across town, the Brooks house was still buzzing with shock and speculation. but here everything was calm. I felt a peace I had not felt in years. A storm had begun, but its center no longer lived inside me. I turned off the living room lights one by one, letting the darkness drift into the corners slowly, naturally, until it matched the quiet in my own mind. Then I walked down the hallway with the certainty that the next steps would reveal themselves soon enough. And for tonight, that was enough. I woke earlier than usual the next morning, before the light had begun to rise over the roofs across the street. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only shows up after a night when something irreversible has happened. I sat up slowly, pulled a sweater over my shoulders, and let myself sit on the edge of the bed for a moment, feeling the weight of another day waiting outside the bedroom door. It felt different from the weight I had carried for months, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee was already in the air. Evan was standing by the counter with a mug in his hand. His hair was a little messy, and his shoulders were hunched, the way they used to be when he was a teenager after a tough day at school. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Morning, Mom." "Morning. Did you sleep at all?" "Some. Enough to get through today." He handed me a second mug. "I made you one." "Thank you." We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. He tapped his fingers lightly on the ceramic as if trying to ground himself. The silence stretched for a while before he finally took a deep breath. "I think I need to go home and talk to her. Not her mother. Just Lena. She was still rattled last night. I need to know where she stands." I nodded. "You are doing the right thing." He gave a humorless little laugh. I never thought I'd be having marriage-defining conversations at 32 over an eviction notice from my own mother's hand. "Life has strange timing," I said quietly. "But sometimes you only see the truth when everything is stripped away." He stared down at the table. "I am scared, Mom." I reached across and placed my hand over his. Everyone is scared when the truth starts rearranging things. It does not mean you are not ready. He swallowed hard. "I hope so." He left about half an hour later. I stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. The street was still half asleep, the morning fog hanging low between the trees. Something told me the conversation waiting for him would not be an easy one. The house was silent after he left. Too silent. The kind of silence that pulls you back into your thoughts whether you want to go or not. I tried to distract myself. I folded laundry. I wiped down the kitchen counters. I watered the plants by the living room window. I even reorganized the drawers in the hallway. But all the while my mind kept circling the same questions. Would Lena finally see what had been happening? Would she fight to fix it? Would she cling tighter to her mother? Would Evan end up in the middle again? Around 10:30, I forced myself to bundle up and step outside. The cold air helped. It always did. I walked down the block and then turned toward the small neighborhood park 3 streets over. The paths were still damp from last night's mist. A few dog walkers moved slowly along the paved trail. Someone jogged past me with earbuds in and a red beanie pulled low over their forehead. I sat down on a bench and let the cold wood seep into the back of my legs. I watched the bare branches tremble in the breeze. Winter in Portland had a way of making everything look stripped down, honest, vulnerable. Maybe that was why this season always brought things to the surface people had worked hard to bury. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out slowly and saw Evan's name on the screen. My heart tightened, but I answered as steadily as I could. "Mom, I'm here." There was a long exhale on the line. We talked. Things got messy, but not in the way I thought they would. "Tell me." He paused like he was piecing together what he wanted to say. "She is finally seeing it. All of it. What her mother has done. What she let happen. She cried for a long time. Then she told me she felt ashamed. She said she had never realized how much she had forced me to choose between her and you. I closed my eyes. A slow warmth spread through my chest. I am proud of her, I said softly. He sniffed once. She wants to apologize to you, but she said she is not ready yet. She is scared she will say the wrong thing and push you further away. I am not going anywhere, I replied. I know. He hesitated. Mom, she wants space from her mother for a while, real space. She asked me to support her in it, and I will. I nodded, even though he could not see it. That is a big step. There was a quiet moment. Then he spoke again. Mom, her mother showed up this morning without warning. She banged on the door. She demanded to see the notice, demanded answers. She went after Lena, said terrible things, told her she was weak, ungrateful, ruining everything. It got loud. The cold air around me felt sharper. What happened? Lena told her to leave. She said she would not be spoken to that way again. You should have seen her. Mom, she stood there shaking, but she didn't back down. Vivian lost her mind, said she had no daughter anymore if she stayed with me. Then she left. My breath caught. I'm sorry she said that to her. Evan exhaled slowly. I am too. But maybe it needed to happen. Sometimes things have to break so people can see where the cracks really are. I stayed quiet, letting the weight of his words settle. We are going to figure things out, he said finally. Lena and I. But Mom, I need you to know I respect you more than ever. I should have seen all of this long ago. You see it now, I said. That is enough. When the call ended, I stayed on the bench for a long time, letting the cold wind brush against my skin. It felt like the last traces of something old being carried off. A piece of me that had clung to blame and disappointment began to loosen its grip. When I got home, I made myself a cup of tea and settled into the chair by the window. The afternoon sun, if you could call it sun, hung weak and pale behind the clouds. I watched the neighborhood kids ride their bikes up and down the street. Their wheels clicked against the pavement like tiny metronomes. Around 3:30, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Thomas Brooks stood on my porch. His shoulders were hunched, his hands stuffed in his coat pockets. He looked older than I remembered. Mrs. Hale, he said quietly. Thomas, come in? He shook his head. I won't stay. I just wanted to say something. I waited. He swallowed hard. I am sorry. Deeply. I should have stood up for you a long time ago. I knew things weren't right. I saw what was happening. I didn't push back. I didn't protect my son or my granddaughter from the worst of it. I let things slide because it was easier to keep the peace. That was weak of me. I let his words settle. They were honest, earnest, heavy. Thank you, I finally said. He nodded once and looked down the driveway. Vivian is unraveling. I don't know what will happen with her. I don't know what she will try next. But I want you to know I understand why you did what you did, and I don't blame you. I felt a quiet ache at his sincerity. Years of silence had kept him overshadowed by his wife's voice. Hearing him speak so plainly felt like another small shift in the landscape. Thomas lifted his eyes to mine again. If she tries anything at all, you call me. I will step in this time. I nodded gently. I appreciate that. He gave me a sad smile, then walked back to his car, his shoulders tight with the weight of too many years. After he left, the house felt strangely warm, not physically, emotionally, as if years of isolation had finally begun to melt. I sat back down in my chair and wrapped my hands around my mug. The quiet felt different now. Not empty, not lonely, just steady. A space that was mine to breathe in without fear of being erased. Outside, the sky darkened into late afternoon. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to meet them, ready. And when the last of the daylight slipped behind the rooftops, the calm inside me held firm, as if preparing for the final turn, still waiting to unfold. The calm held through the evening and into the next morning, carrying me through the quiet rituals of making coffee and opening the blinds. The sky was soft and pale, tinted with a faint winter gold that only lasted a few minutes before fading back into gray. I stood there for a moment, feeling the warmth of the mug seep into my palms, and let myself breathe into the stillness. For the first time in months, maybe even years, the quiet did not feel like something I had to endure. It felt like something I had earned. Evan came out of the guest room looking better rested than I expected. His shoulders were still heavy, but not as weighed down as they had been the day before. He greeted me softly, poured himself coffee, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Lena wants to come over in a bit," he said. "She wants to talk to you, alone. If you are open to that." I nodded. "I am." He watched me for a moment, as if he needed to make sure I was not agreeing out of obligation. When he saw that I meant it, he relaxed a little. "I will give you two some space. I'm heading out for a walk." He hesitated, then added, "She is trying. Mom, really trying." "I know." When he left, I took a few minutes to straighten the living room and set a fresh pot of tea on the stove. I was not nervous, not in the way I once would have been. There was no fear of being dismissed or talked over. This conversation belonged to both of us. 20 minutes later, a quiet knock came at the door. I opened it to find Lena standing on my porch, bundled in a soft beige coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in presence, as if something had softened inside her. "Hi, Maggie," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come in?" She stepped inside and stood just past the doorway, looking uncertain, like she did not know whether she deserved to sit or stand or speak. I motioned her toward the couch, then sat across from her with the tea kettle still warming behind me. For a moment she said nothing. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked quickly and looked down at her hands. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, "and I do not even know where to begin." I waited without rushing her. I let my mother talk about you in ways no one should talk about family. I let her shape what I thought was acceptable. I let her dictate how our home should run, how holidays should look, who belonged and who did not. She told me that keeping control was what made a strong family, and I believed her because I was raised in that world. But I see now that control and strength are not the same thing, not even close. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I should have stood up for you. I should have seen how much you were doing for us. I should have questioned her earlier. I am ashamed of how long it took me." Her voice broke on those last words. She looked at me, eyes full of guilt and something deeper, something I had not seen in her before. Honesty. I leaned forward just slightly. "Thank you for saying that." She covered her mouth for a moment, as if trying to keep from crying too hard. "I love Evan. I love him with everything I have. And I almost let my mother tear apart the very foundation of our life because I was too afraid to stand up to her. I cannot let that continue. I will not let that continue." I nodded slowly. I could feel the sincerity in her voice. It was not polished. It was not rehearsed. It was real. Lena took a breath. "I know what happened last night was a lot, but in a strange way. It forced something open. It made me see everything clearly. And I want to change things. I want to build something different. But I cannot do that if you do not trust me again." She paused, searching my face. "I want to be better, and I hope you can forgive me someday. Maybe not today, but someday." Her words settled into the room like soft dust, quiet but undeniable. I let them sit there for a moment before I answered. I do not expect perfection. I said, I do not expect you to dismantle everything you were raised with overnight, but I do expect honesty and respect. And I expect you to treat the people who love your husband as part of your family, not threats to it. Tears spilled down her cheeks again. I can do that, she whispered. I want to do that. I reached out and touched her hand lightly. Then we take it one step at a time. She let out a shaky breath, relief filling her features. Thank you, Maggie, truly. We sat for a long moment in a silence that felt different from any silence we had shared before, a silence with room for repair. When she finally stood, she looked steadier, as if something inside her had found footing for the first time. She left with a soft promise to talk again soon. Not long after she was gone, Evan returned, his cheeks red from the cold. He stepped inside and glanced around anxiously. How did it go? It was honest, I said, and that is a good start. He nodded with a relieved exhale. Later that afternoon, as the sun slipped behind a low blanket of gray clouds, I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old box of documents I had laid on the bed days earlier. This time I closed it firmly and slid it back to its place in the closet. I did not need to revisit it again. The past had already shifted. My heart fluttered once, but not with fear, more like release, as if something in me had finally found space to breathe. In the evening, I made a small dinner for the two of us. We ate quietly, both reflecting in our own way. Then Evan sat back in his chair and looked at me with a softness I had not seen since he was a boy. Mom, you saved yourself, and in some ways you saved us too. I felt a warmth rise in my chest. Maybe I just stopped letting other people write my story. He smiled. Either way, I am grateful. The night settled gently around us. Snow began to fall outside, dusting the street in a thin white layer. The house felt full again, not with noise, but with something better, something settled, something right. When I finally went to bed, I lay under the soft quilt, listening to the quiet hum of winter outside my window. I let my eyes close on a deep, steady breath. The next chapter of my life waited patiently, and this time, I would enter it on my own terms. If you felt something in my story, if you saw pieces of your own journey in mine, I would love for you to share your thoughts, your experiences, or even just your presence. Stay with me for the next story. There is always another chapter waiting to be told.